Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, I guess, depending on where you are. My name is Emily Spranger. I am an academic trainer for the Center for Teaching and Learning, and we are happy to have you here today for Dr. Linda Bloomberg's webinar of Publishing and Presenting Your Dissertation Research. We're glad to have you here today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Dr. Bloomberg has asked if you have any questions to please post any questions that you have in the chat, or you can use the Q&A function as well too, which is at the very bottom of your Zoom screen. She has mentioned that she will stop periodically throughout her presentation to answer any questions that you may have. So if something comes up, go ahead and write it down and we'll address it as we go. Another general housekeeping thing, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Center for Teaching and Learning area where we house all of our webinars. The last thing is Dr. Linda Bloomberg is here with us, but she has to keep her camera off because her internet's being kind of funky today. So we appreciate you understanding that. And without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Dr. Bloomberg.
Thanks so much, Emily, and thank you so much to the CTL, as always, for hosting these really wonderfully informative webinars for all of our students and faculty, and I'm always happy to present. As Emily said, the recording will be posted in the CTL section of the Commons, so everybody who's been on the call and even those who are not able to make the actual session will have access to this recording. In addition, as Emily said, I'm always very happy to have these sessions be interactive. And so even though there is a section at the end where we will stop for Q&A, I will be stopping periodically along the way, and Emily will be collecting information from the chat, and I'll answer any questions as they come up periodically as we go through the presentation. So that said, once again, thank you to everybody who's taken the time in the middle of your day, your afternoon, or your morning, wherever you are right now, to be present and to learn with me, and I can learn from you, as I always do from the attendees, about this really important topic of publishing and presenting your dissertation research. Remember, as we move through our process as a student, we conduct our research, we complete our dissertations, and then we're no longer students, but scholars. And with being a scholar comes additional responsibilities and additional opportunities. And one of the main opportunities that comes along with moving through the research process and finally completing your defense successfully is that you now have the opportunity to share your research and your findings with a much broader audience than just the academic audience here at NCU, being your committee, your colleagues, and others in your circle, your professional circle. You now have the opportunity to really put your research out there for a much broader audience to see and be aware of and read and learn from. And this is where all the opportunity comes in for you finally. I'm going to go through all the different types of opportunities that are available. And as I said, we're going to be stopping for questions because there's a lot to take in here. The first strategy, I would say, once you've decompressed from the complete dissertation process and you've actually had a time to take care of yourself and rest and relax after this very intense experience that could have gone on for a number of years in most cases, is to think about engaging in relevant professional activities in your field of practice. So there are many ways that you can find out about professional activities and professional associations. You can speak to your committee members, you can speak to colleagues, you can find out yourself by Googling what's available. By this, I mean organizations that are related to your field of practice. And remember, there are very often student rates, and you still are considered a student once you're in the dissertation phase and just beyond it. There might be slight different rates once you become an alumni. And these are all things you can find out from the actual membership organizations. But really try and become involved in these organizations. Try and see what's available. What resources do they offer? What do you now have access to? What can you use to help yourself get your own research off the ground? So these are some of the questions you can be asking yourself as you move into aligning yourself with the professional organizations that are appropriate. Next comes the big one, and this is something that's on the tip of everybody's tongue. The minute they finish their dissertation, many students want to publish. It's really exciting. It's a great opportunity. And yes, it is, but it comes with a lot of thinking and care and preparation as well. And that is something I really do want you to be aware of. And that's why I'm going to spend the bulk of this presentation on publication opportunities, so that you really do have a very clear idea of the expectations and the requirements that are involved. The first thing I want to point out is this idea of peer-reviewed journals. You may have already heard your chair and your subject matter expert talk about this over and over again during the dissertation process, because we really do try and steer our students here at NCU and at any reputable institution to really include peer-reviewed journals and articles and resources rather than popular articles. In other words, articles that you can just get off the internet that have not been peer-reviewed. You do not really know where they've come from, who may be the authors. Are these articles accurate? Are they relevant? Are they current? What kind of information is included in them? With peer-reviewed journals, which are refereed or scholarly journals, these are written by professionals, and these have also been reviewed by several other experts in the field before the articles actually published. So this really gives credence to the article's quality and credibility. Remember, within the academic community, peer review is an essential component of academic writing. This maintains integrity by ensuring that the papers that are published in academic journals have accurately answered the research questions and drawn credible and accurate conclusions about the research findings. So it's really essential that you try and focus now on applying to and making plans to submit to peer-reviewed journals. And I've included a link here about how to recognize peer-reviewed journals, which when you get this presentation, you can click on it and you'll be able to see what's available. It's not that hard to detect whether a journal is peer-reviewed or not. Now, the very opposite, the antithesis of peer-reviewed journals are what is called predatory journals. And this is where some caution needs to be taken, because very often students, whether they've completed their dissertation research or not, will feel pretty happy that many journals are suddenly contacting them to submit proposals. And it seems as though this is a great idea and it's really complimentary. I'm getting all these invitations, but please beware that a lot of these journals that send out these sort of articles are prioritizing self-interest at the expense of scholarship. And these are not necessarily peer-reviewed journals. They lack transparency. They do not always cover credible information about their readership. There's not always very good and proper oversight of these journals. And so these really are not advisable. As attractive as it may sound, that you can submit an article and have it published and be an author, this is really not the way to go, because in the long run, this really won't serve you well in terms of academic integrity. And this is really, these journals are not really credible in terms of having on your resume or your CV. So I just want to stress that this is something to really be aware of. And not all students are aware of it because, as I say, you're going to get a barrage of emails inviting you to participate and submit articles. Now, there are clear ways to detect whether journals are peer-reviewed or predatory. And again, I've included a link over here, which you can use to inform yourself. But some ways to identify a predatory journal are as follows. Always check the website. Check if the journal is a member of a reputable publishing council or not. That's a clear giveaway. Check the contact information and the editorial board. You'll be able to detect whether this is something that is credible or not. Take a close look at their peer review process and their publication timelines. Very often they won't even have a peer review process. no peer review process will be mentioned, and sometimes an inaccurate peer review process may be included. So this is something you really need to look into, and if it is there, take a deeper look and see exactly what's involved. And then also, very importantly, take the time to read through some past issues of this journal to determine its credibility. And you'll have a fairly good idea once you've done all of these things as to whether this is a reputable journal or not. Now, there's a term here that I want to just clarify, and you'll see that coming up again and again, and it's a term called an impact factor, often referred to as an IF. The impact factor of an academic journal is a scientific index that reflects the yearly average number of citations included in the last 2 years of the journal. So that indicates how many people are using the journal or referring to the journal or citing the journal. Not specific articles, but the journal itself. And journals with a higher impact factor are often those deemed to be more important than those with lower impact factors. Now, when it comes to predatory, I just want to go back for a moment to the previous slide. When it comes to predatory as opposed to peer-reviewed journals, you'll notice that peer-reviewed journals have impact factors. Very, very often, the predatory journals don't even list an impact factor because there is not one. They were not able to establish an impact factor. Now, I've had many questions recently from students about this idea of open access versus traditional journals. And I just want to cover this as well. And then I'm going to stop for a moment after I've discussed this slide. In our society, research is disseminated these days, as we all know, through many, many venues, including social media. Blogs, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And these social media platforms are available to anybody. These are freely, publicly available platforms, as we all know. Now, as opposed to traditional journals, which often charge readers a fee to access the journal content, open access journals provide content free of access. And open access refers to freely available digital online information, essentially. That's what open access is. And open access scholarly literature is free of charge and often carries less restrictive copyright and licensing barriers than traditionally published works, both for the user and for the author. While open access is a newer form of publishing, because remember, the internet is relatively new, even though it's been going for a few decades now. In the past, some 20 years ago, there was no such thing. The only journals that were available were traditional journals, hard copy, and one could not access them online. But now many open access journals comply with well-established peer review processes and maintain high publishing standards. So open access should not be confused with predatory at all. Open access journals are accessible, but they also are, in many cases, peer-reviewed and credible. So I just want you to know that this is nothing that you need to be wary of and nothing that you should feel that you need to stay away from. Open access is acceptable. So in making the choice between open access and traditional, there are a couple of criteria that you should bear in mind when you're choosing between, should I publish in a traditional journal or should I publish in an open access journal? And these are the different criteria that I would say you should take into consideration. The one is visibility. Publishing in an open access journal means that more people are likely to see it because more people are likely to access it for free. In addition, your data will be available to people and the general public, and many people who do not have access to traditional expensive journal subscriptions. So the big thing is visibility. You're likely to garner greater visibility with an open access journal. That's the first thing. The second thing is the cost factor. Both traditional and open access journals can charge a fee at the time of submission, but the other costs associated with publications and subscriptions become much higher when it's associated with a traditional paper hard copy journal. So the second factor to consider is a cost factor. You may be having to spend a lot more if you go with a traditional journal. Again, I'm not trying to sway anybody from going with traditional journals because traditional journals are the standard, credible way to publish, established throughout the years, and nothing to be to stay away from. But there are, as I say, I'm trying to be realistic and point out that traditional journals do come with additional cost factors, not just financially, but in terms of time and effort and accessibility. The third criterion is prestige. Some researchers are reluctant to publish in open access journals because they feel that these might not be as credible and as reputable as traditional journals in their field. So there's this perception of perceived, this idea of perceived quality of open access, that it may be somewhat less prestigious than traditional. Many academics still place high importance on brand name journals because this really does increase their chances of being promoted, gaining tenure, and obtaining funding for grant proposals. So that is a reality, that traditional journals very often do carry a higher prestige. Also, many open access journals are newer, and so they haven't had the time to receive their impact factor yet. So they haven't had the time to increase that impact factor over time with more and more people citing them. So that's another aspect to consider. The prestige aspect does favor traditional journals, and that is just one of the criteria that we need to be aware of. And then speed. We're often really impatient, and understandably so, because we don't want to spend years and years and years trying to get something published, as can often be the case with a traditional journal. I'm not saying necessarily years and years, but it can go over a year sometime with a peer review process. So if you're considering speed, and speed is an important criterion to you, then publishing in an open access journal may serve you better. You should always check what any journal that you're applying to, you should always check what they're advertising as their publication process, their mission statement, and how long they estimate for an article to become published in their publication. So those are the different factors to take into consideration when making the decision between open access and traditional: visibility, cost, prestige, and speed. And I'm going to stop there for a moment because we're going to be going into some greater detail now about how to actually apply to journals. So I'm going to stop now and just ask Emily if any questions have come in, and even if they haven't come in, if you have one now, please let Emily know and I'll be happy to answer.
Yes, we do have one, Dr. Bloomberg, in the Q&A. From Pilar, I am concerned that my dissertation research conducted from Facebook recruitment won't be considered valid and credible because of the recruitment methodology. Is this a valid concern with academia? That is online research less valid than traditional research?
My immediate reaction to that is that there should be no concern about that, because recruiting, firstly in COVID, recruiting online has become much, much more prevalent and in fact essential because of social distancing. And our IRB here at NCU fully recognizes that. So that is not a limitation. That does not diminish the credibility of your research. And going one step further, I would say that journals are aware of this too. So if you've conducted your sample selection and your recruitment process online, even through a social media platform like Facebook or others, if you have followed the necessary IRB protocols with consent, informed consent, and anonymity, you've protected your participants' rights throughout the research, I don't think that that is a factor to be concerned about at all in terms of publication. Hope that helps.
Great. We have another question from Greg Mitchell. Is it better to submit to multiple journals at the same time or submit to one targeted journal and wait for a response before submitting another?
That's a really, really great question. And I'm going to be looking at that more closely when we go further, because that is something I was going to cover. But just so that you know, there's no right or wrong with this. You can have a journal in mind and go full headway with that particular journal and see how it goes and see what the outcome is. Or you can sort of try and cover your bases and apply to various journals and see what comes up. It just really is a matter of preference. So there's no right or wrong. Depends on your personality and what type of approach you want to take. So there's no right or wrong, and neither of them is wrong. So decide what serves you best. If you've come up with a list of journals that are appropriate to your topic, there's nothing wrong with going ahead and applying to all of them and seeing what happens, and then choosing the one, or hopefully at least getting one acceptance that serves your needs.
Great. And for right now, Dr. Bloomberg, that was all that's in the Q&A.
Okay, those are great questions. Both of those questions were really wonderful. Thanks so much to both. Was it 2 or 3 questions? I can't remember. 2? Okay. Thanks to both of you for those questions, because I think that everybody can learn from both of those. And I'm sure that those questions will apply to everybody. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Dr. Bloomberg? Yeah, one more.
Perfect.
From Timothy Brandon, my experience with journals I am submitting with is single thread is required. Or he said single thread is required is what I'm reading.
I'm not sure I understand that. Can you just explain a little more what he means?
Can you explain a little bit more, Timothy? One thing I can do too is allow him to speak as well too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hold on one second. Let me give you a chance to talk here, Timothy.
Okay, great.
Maybe I should have gotten my glasses. Hold on one second.
Okay, there he is.
Can you unmute yourself, Timothy?
Thank you. Yeah, sorry that sounded cryptic, but I defended a year ago, and I've been going through the submission process, I guess, for the last 3 months, and each one takes about 3 weeks before I get a response with some feedback. However, the journal set that I've been using, which are the highest impact factor journals in the project management realm and business administration, are all requiring with their advice to authors that they will not consider a submission if it's in play with any other journal.
Okay, so absolutely, some journals do specify that, and that's why I said initially, take a very, very clear look at at the requirements of the journals that you're submitting to. Some journals may not want that, because then they feel it could be a waste of their time if you're submitting all over the place and they're taking the time to conduct reviews, and then you may reject it or you may go somewhere else. So just be sure that you've read all the journal's requirements, and some journals are okay with it. But as you say, some are not. So just be clear on the expectations and the requirements, and then you'll know how to proceed. Does that help? Sorry, Timothy, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yes, absolutely. I just want to make that one clarification.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you also. That's a great point, and thank you for bringing that to the attention of everybody on the call, because that's important to know and that's helpful to everybody. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for right now. I will let you carry on, and we'll come back to some questions in a little bit. Feel free to post in the Q&A, okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to move forward. So now we're going to look at actually doing a journal search. And I just wanted to put up here an example of something that I searched for recently. I was looking at distance education journals. I had an article that I wanted to publish. And so I went onto Google Scholar and I put in my keywords, and up came a link with all the different journal articles. There were actually 4 or 5 pages of them, of possibilities. And I could then go in and click on any of the ones that I found were relevant and see what their requirements were, what their expectations were, what their focus was. Because as you can see, even though it seems kind of simple, distance education learning, there's so many different journals and each of them has a slightly different focus. And I'm just going to, my point in doing this is just to show you how you have to pick the journal that's most aligned with your topic. For example, there was the American Journal of Distance Education. There was the Asian Association of Open Universities Journal. There was an Australian journal. There was a British one. There was a Canadian one. There was something called Communications and Information Literacy, Computers in Education, Contemporary Issues in Technology and Teacher Education. So there's so many, many, many varied options. There are hundreds, in fact, thousands of journals out there. So my point is to choose the one or the set of journals that you feel will be most appropriate. That's the first step. The second step is to go into the journals that you're accessing and read more about them. And that's what I said a little earlier on. Who are the editorial team? What are their policies? What is their focus and scope? What's their peer review process? What is their open access policy? What are their submission guidelines? What are their author guidelines? The copyright issues, and on and on. So once you've accessed potential journals, remember these are just potential at the moment, you can go in and search the journal for the impact factor, see that it is in fact a peer-reviewed journal and not a predatory journal, etc., etc. But most important, you want to know what their submission policies are, which is over here, because this is what's going to give you the most information that you need to actually go ahead and submit a proposal. I just pulled up again and posted here different looks of what you might see when you enter into a journal. You might see their mission statement. You might see their archives, where you can look at their previous editions. You'll see their submission guidelines, which is the most important thing. You'll see all the different ideas that they put out here. Here they put submission deadlines, review. Here this one gives you, if you submit in February, you'd get a review back in March with a publication target date, things like that. So these are just all ideas of what you'll see. Here's another one. Subscription information, submission guidelines, review policies, who's the editor, ways to sign up for new issue alerts, a little bit about the journal where you can read up. And this is really important as well. You want to be really careful about who you're submitting to, because remember, you're taking all this time to write an article and have a publication out. So you want this journal to be something that's, you want to know about it. You want to know exactly who you're submitting to. It's like applying for a job or like buying a new car. You don't want to just go into this blindly. You want to know exactly what you're getting at the end. So in order to move forward, I've got 2 slides here that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to stop again. The first one is preparation, and the second one that I'm going to get to is called persistence. But let's look at preparation, because I think based on everything I've spoken about thus far, you have a very clear idea in your mind that this is a process, that this is something that takes a lot of thinking about and caring and preparation. The first point I want to make is that you've come out of your doctoral degree with a dissertation, which, as you know, is either a 5 or a 3 chapter dissertation. It's very involved. It has a full literature review. It's got a methodology section. You've got your findings. You've got your interpretation of the findings. You've got conclusions and recommendations. But you're now wanting to create a publication, and that's not your actual dissertation. And this is what I call de-dissertationizing your dissertation. You've got to take out of your dissertation that part or that section that you want published. And you'll know initially what it is that you want to publish. Generally, it's the findings of your study and how the findings relate to the literature. So those 2 sections, you're going to have to, obviously say how you conducted the research in order to get to the findings. But you're not going to, for instance, present a full methodology chapter or a full introductory chapter with research problems, pages long. You're going to have a word count, remember, so you cannot present everything. So you're going to have to first decide in your mind what aspect of your dissertation research or what aspect of your findings you want to present or publish. You're then going to go in and take a look at what journals are available and what their specific requirements are. And you're then going to have to rewrite what you want to publish for a particular audience. In other words, who reads that journal? Is it educators? Is it students? Is it foreign educators? Is it K through 12? Is it higher ed? All of these different questions are something that you need to consider very carefully, because remember, you have to write for a particular audience. If you don't, then that particular journal won't want your publication. They only want a publication for their audience, remember? Who are they appealing to? Who reads that particular journal? And secondly, if you don't know who you're writing for, you're not going to be able to keep your article focused. So you have to be very, very clear on who the audience is and who's going to read your work, and next, who reads the actual journals that you're looking at. The next very, very important point is, and this applies to writing your dissertation as well, please make sure that your article, as with your dissertation, is thoroughly edited and free of typos and grammatical errors. Because if you submit an article to a reputable journal full of errors and typos, I know from personal experience, I've worked with editors and I know people who work on editorial boards, they're more than likely going to throw out your application without even reading it. If somebody is going to take the time to review your work, you need to respect that they are professionals, and you need to present your work in a professional manner for them to actually welcome your submission and read through it and make recommendations for publication or not. So my point here is that proofreading is essential. So again, preparation is de-dissertationizing, making sure that you follow all the publication requirements, be clear on the audience, and make sure that your article is thoroughly edited by proofreading. That's preparation. The next slide that I want to bring to your attention is called persistence. And this is something that, think about where we all are right now in this country at this time. We're having to exercise extreme patience to find out the results of an election. Well, the same applies to a publication. You have to exercise patience because the process is not going to happen overnight or even within a week. As Timothy may have realized, and many other people who've applied for journal publications, this is a process that takes time, especially if it's a peer-reviewed journal, which is something that you are wanting. So please be patient. If you don't succeed with a particular journal, persist in seeking new avenues. I say this from personal experience. I have published extensively, both articles and books, and I can honestly say from my own experience that publications don't just happen overnight for the most part. It's a waiting game. It's a matter of persisting and moving to another avenue if something is not happening or if a door closes. I'm not saying that you will absolutely achieve success, but please do try. If you come to the end of the road with a particular publisher and they say, we're sorry, we regret to inform you, that's always information we don't want to see. We regret to inform you that your article will not be available, will not be published in our journal. Then take a deep breath, look for other journals, and persist. That is really a very strong message to you, not to give up and to try and take what it takes to get this done. I'm going to stop now for questions again.
Great. This is a great time. We have a couple of questions. Henry says, I am having trouble shrinking my dissertation research to the 3,000 to 7,000 word for a journal article. And I was wondering, he mentioned at the time, are you going to address this? I believe you touched on it, but do you have any helpful hints for that?
The only hint I can say is you've got to just try and try and try. You've got to just keep your writing very, very focused. Take out any excess words. Read through very, very carefully. Even have somebody read through it for you. And remove any excess sentences. That'll already start reducing the word count. But if you keep it if you keep the article very, very focused, you will need to trim it down to the maximum word count. Again, if it goes over the word count, the journal editors are going to just throw it out. So to protect yourself and to give yourself the best chance of acceptance, just keep on trimming and trimming and trimming. It's again a matter of patience, a matter of persistence, but that is one of the aspects of de-dissertationizing your dissertation research. It cannot be long and drawn out. It has to be an article that will fit within the parameters of the journal's requirements.
Okay, great. And then Ricky is asking, how do you tell if a journal is peer-reviewed or OA so that you don't fall prey to fraudulent journals?
As I said, if you go into the particular journal's website, you'll be able to see whether they're peer-reviewed. If it's a predatory journal and they claim to be peer-reviewed, you will really be able to see by poking a little further and digging a little deeper, or even contacting them sometimes and asking about their peer review process, who stands on their editorial board, how they, what is their mission, what is their procedure for peer review, et cetera, et cetera. The impact factor is another very clear indicator of whether a journal is credible. So a predatory journal is unlikely to have an impact factor at all, which is an immediate red flag.
Okay, great. Right now, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A.
Okay. Thanks, Emily. I just want to mention something that just popped into my mind as well. And this is something to be aware of. In de-dissertationizing your dissertation, as I put it, and developing an article for publication based on a particular topic that you want to write about, which is basically related to the findings of your study. That's the meat of the study. That's what you really are wanting to write about, right? You can actually, and this happened to me with my dissertation, I got 2 journal articles out of my own dissertation because I wrote them with a different focus. So even though both of them were based on my study's findings, I was able to take a leaning in 2 different ways and get 2 different articles out of that same study. So I don't want to overwhelm you, but that is a possibility. Again, when you're looking at particular journals, you're going to know what their requirement is and who their audience is. And you've got to write for that audience. But you may find another journal with a different audience that'll be interested in your study from a slightly different perspective. So it's a matter of changing perspective, not swaying your findings or not falsifying your findings, but as I say, writing for the appropriate and different audience. I don't know if there are any questions about that. Emily?
Oh, yes, hold on one second. I think so. Oh, no, I don't see any questions about that, but this one has popped up in the chat. They had to step away to answer a call, so they apologize.
Okay.
Do we go to the journal website to find their process for submitting articles? And then again, she apologized if we've already covered this.
As I showed previously on one of the previous sites, you go to their website and all of the different websites, the different examples that I put up here, they all have a section about submissions. They'll all talk about what their submission guidelines are. Here, submissions. So that's a very important part of what you want to look at. What are they looking for? What is their word count? What is their focus? Who's their audience? And they'll have very, very, very clear and focused guidelines that you will need to stick to and abide by if you want to get your article published in their journal.
And just as a brief reminder, Dr. Bloomberg has actually sent me the presentation as well, so I will post that as well in the comments, in the CTL comments for future reference in case you need to look back at the literature, even though this is a recorded webinar. I've had several questions pop up in.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, great. Christy says, should you separate the findings into several points to create several articles?
Again, that depends on your particular study. That might be a viability, but it may not. I'm not suggesting that you separate the findings for particular articles. I was more suggesting the focus of the findings. I'll just give you a very, very brief example of my own experience. Okay. I wrote my dissertation, and this is just an example so that it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. It's not a matter of separating the findings, it was more about the focus of the findings. So I wrote my dissertation on creating an online learning community in a master's program in a religious education program. Okay, it was a master's distance education program where students were situated all around the country, and it was actually a religious education program. So I took my dissertation, which was that, okay, and I got 2 articles out of it, because the first article that I wrote was on online learning communities. I didn't focus on the religious education part of it. I didn't deny that, but that wasn't the main focus. The focus was developing learning communities online. And I got that published in the Journal of Distance Education, a traditional hard copy journal. I then took the religious aspect of it, which was religious education, and I got it published in a journal that was looking for those type of articles, religious education and online learning communities. So as you can see, I slightly changed the focus to connect with the audience of the particular journal, and the 2 different journals took the same, took my article, which was written somewhat differently, and published it appropriately. I hope that makes sense. I hope that sort of like explains what I mean by having a different focus. But I think that for the first shot of publication, try for 1 at least. Try not to get all multiple publications, because that's just going to complicate your process. If you can get 1 publication out, that's excellent. If you can get more than 1, that's really great as well. Other questions?
Yes, several. Don says, you might have made this point before, but however, is there a time frame after completing your dissertation and publishing the same?
Okay. There is no time frame, but remember this, you want your research to be current. And that is why when we're doing dissertation research as chairs, we say to our students, please use the most current literature available, because you don't want your study to seem outdated. So if you're using current literature, which is within the last 4 to 5 years at the most, you're keeping your study current. Now, if you wait a year or 2 to publish, that's okay, because your literature is still relatively current. But if you wait 5 to 10 years, then your study is already getting outdated, because the literature that you referred to, which you want to keep some of that literature for your article, remember, you want to use that to substantiate your findings, then your study is going to appear very dated. So I would say sooner than later is better. Also, because it takes time to get published. So if you start only 5 years later, you're going to be 5 years out, and it can take, a year or 2 or whatever added to that. And also you're out of the mindset of writing. So once you're still in the groove of writing and researching, and your findings are so clear in your mind, and you're fired up to go, and you've just defended, I'm not saying the very next day start trying to publish. Give yourself a bit of space to breathe and relax and spend time with your family after this long process of dissertation research. But I wouldn't wait for years.
We have another question. Timothy asked, I was able to use the same data set to derive different but related conclusions using different analysis techniques.
Well, that's a great article to write about. I'm not saying there would necessarily be 2 articles, unless there's a way that you could change it, because remember, you cannot submit the exact same article to 2 different journals. That's kind of illegal. So the articles that you're submitting, like I gave the example of mine, were 2 completely different articles. They were based on the same study, but they were 2 complete different articles with a different focus. The one was about distance learning, and the one was more about religious education. So Timothy, I'm not suggesting that would necessarily be 2 articles, unless you find a way that's appropriate. But that is a great article to write about, that you use different analytical approaches. That's something that could be very interesting to people and very informative.
And I'm actually going to add this last little bit on there too, just because I feel like it's related. Timothy mentioned he's planning to publish 4 papers from the same mixed study. Is it appropriate to duplicate the literature review for each of the papers?
I would say be upfront with the journals and let them know that you're submitting the same literature review to another journal. You don't want anything to be considered plagiarism. Remember, there's also such a thing as self-plagiarism. So I would just be very upfront that you're using the same literature review. And if they're not okay with that, you may have to change your literature review or incorporate slightly different literature or incorporate it in a different order or whatever. You may not be able to have the exact same literature review. So again, check with the journals and check with their submission requirements.
Great. This is from an anonymous attendee. Do these journal publications pay for publishing, or does the student pay for the publishing of the article?
Again, every journal is different. Traditional journals may require some payment for the publication. Remember, as I said earlier, some of the financial input with traditional journals comes in at the end, at the publication stage, because they may need funding for actually printing the hard copies, and that's where they make their money off of your publications. So they may require some payment. So again, checking any of the potential journals, submission requirements, and ask any questions that you have if something's not clear to you, and I'm sure that you'll get the answers that you need.
Great. And then Henry says, if I do 2 different articles with different focuses, like you suggested, can I submit 2 different journals at the same time because they are 2 different articles?
Yes. If they're 2 different articles, then it's not like you're submitting the same article to multiple journals. So in that case, you can go ahead with 2 different articles, 2 different journals, and they really have nothing to do with each other. Unless you're using the same exam, for example, if you're using the same literature review, just be upfront and check that that's acceptable.
Great. 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. And then there was more that came in. What about when we are referencing an original theory? For example, I have referenced original journal articles from the 1960s plus because they were the original theoretical analysis of a business concept. Should I try to avoid this in publishing?
No. If you're using landmark or seminal studies, then they can be completely, they can be from the beginning of the century even. For example, if you're referencing John Dewey, you're doing an educational study, he's one of the classic educators of all times. And if you're referencing his work, which could be from the 1910 to 1930, that's absolutely acceptable. This emphasis on current journals applies to current research. So if you're looking at how farmers are managing their crops in winter, and you're looking at a journal from 1969, that's not going to carry as much weight as a journal that's from 2019, because the 2019 information is much more relevant about farmers than farmers in 1969. I'm just giving an example.
Okay. I'm going to ask this question, which is in the chat. How do you recognize your audience?
You'll know this from looking at the journal submission guidelines. You'll know who they appeal to, who reads their journals, who their articles are written for. So that's how you'll know. And if you're not, again, 100% clear, you can always contact them with any of these questions and they will respond.
Okay. Another one is, can I title and use same information from a previous dissertation I worked on and did not complete? I continued majoring in an educational doctoral program.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, great. And then this
remember, even people who have, sorry, Emily, even people who have a master's degree can publish. You don't have to have a doctorate to publish. You can publish a master's thesis. In fact, my very, very first publication was of my master's thesis. So yeah.
Okay, great. I have Greg who has asked, I think you may have covered this briefly on one of the slides, but are there different techniques from what you have presented here than what the process may be for conference publication?
Oh, I'm going to get to conferences in a moment.
Okay, great. Do you have time for 2 more before we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I don't know what this is in reference to. It says just by using updated sources, question mark. I think this
Let's
is
just
from
leave. I just don't want to waste time on something we're not clear about, because I'm just watching the clock and we literally have like 9 minutes left.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. Should we move on a little bit and see if we can
let's move on and just keep, if there's one more question, can we hold it until the end?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go a little faster now because I didn't realize this information there's a lot of information here. So the whole of my first section, which I've just finished, is journal publication. I just want to spend a little bit of time, and I'm not going to spend as much time because I just don't have it. We don't have the time on conference and webinar presentations, which is another way of presenting your dissertation research and a wonderful way to get into that academic community by way of academic conferences. I have a lot of information here about working with your instructor. Sometimes you will students can partner with their instructors at professional conferences. Speak to your faculty about this opportunity. Look at what the conference attendance submission guidelines are. Same as a journal, conferences have specific guidelines for how you can present or submit a paper at their conference. And remember, since COVID, virtual conference opportunities are the way to go. It's the way that most conferences are being conducted these days, and we don't know for how long. So virtual conferences are available. We often will put these up. I know I do, opportunities on the in the Commons, so you can be aware of what conference opportunities are available. I know that one was actually put up today in the Commons. I didn't put it up, but I saw it there for the OLC Accelerate conference. So please take a look at our Commons and other venues for what conferences are available that are particularly relevant to your field of practice. The next and almost ending aspect I wanted to talk about was podcasts, which is another way of presenting your findings. Podcasts are becoming increasingly popular with educators, where people can broadcast their information and their findings to a broader audience. It's an excellent communication tool to promote your research among a broader audience than just the academic community, in fact. So creating podcasts is relatively simple. There are specific techniques to create them, which I've outlined over here. You should develop an outline so your discussion flows logically. Be very decisive about what you want to present and what your message is. Remember, you also have to be very clear about who your audience is, because you want to speak directly to that audience. You should have a very strong opinion because you now are an expert in your topic. And so you should have a very strong opinion of what your findings are, what's out there in the field, and what the opportunities are regarding your research. You'll need to talk very clearly so that people will be engaged and will listen to your podcast till the very end. Remember, you want to retain the audience's attention and not for them to be bored or inattentive or kind of switch off. So podcasts do have a lot of benefits. It's an alternative to videos like YouTube. It can generate increased traffic. It can help build your brand. It can help you build relationships with an intended audience. It's relatively easy and inexpensive to create a podcast. They can be highly engaging. And it also is a way of improving your public speaking skills in preparation for conference presentations. Remember, you can also link your podcasts to your social media outlets. So people will have easy access, just by way of a click, to access your podcast and hear your message. And there are certain practical steps also for getting started with podcasts. The most important one being considering who your audience is, what's important about your work that you want to publicize, the importance of organizing and planning the content so that the discussion flows logically, using social media for promotion, etc. And the final way of communicating and presenting research is by blogging. And a blog is a type of website that focuses on written content. You can use blogs for any aspect of your research that you want to put out there into the bigger world. Again, it's a way of connecting with audiences. You can link your blog to your social media sites and share your ideas with like-minded people. And also, really, one of the most important things about blogs is you open up a dialogue, because readers can comment on your blog. They can add material. They can add their reactions, and so it becomes an ongoing dialogue about your topic. So that is another really excellent way to put your work out there into the larger world. Let people benefit from hearing what you've researched, what you've found, what your study has uncovered, etc. And I just wanted to end with this, and we're going to have just a few minutes for questions at the end now, is I'd like you to take away from this what is on your wish list. What is on your wish list for moving forward with presenting and publishing your research? From listening to this webinar today, what has been solidified for you? What is new to you? What is surprising to you? What do you hope for? Think about those things as you move forward in your day and in your week, and as you continue completing your study, or if you've just finished your study, or if you finished your study some time ago. How can you revive and rekindle that energy and enthusiasm to put your ideas out there, to make your work known, to present your ideas to the world, and to become an author or a publisher or a presenter or a blogger or a podcaster? So with that, that was my presentation, and I know that we just have a few moments left. So Emily, I'm happy to take questions, and please let me know.
Absolutely. And I feel like you've touched on this several times throughout, because I can see how there would be so many benefits, but maybe some high-level benefits. What is the benefit to the writer for publishing their article?
Huge benefits, because it puts you into the realm of being a scholar. Once you have an article to your name, you then have that to add to your resume or CV. And when you're applying for positions, especially in academia, that is huge. Most academic positions require publications. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this term. It's a little cliched, but it's called publish or perish. And that is very, very prominent in the academic world and always has been. A true academic should have publications to their name. And many academic institutions will require their professors to continue publishing on an annual basis to keep current in the field. So publication can be a one-off, or it can be an ongoing exercise if you're continually involved in research and you have ideas to share. But there are huge, huge benefits, especially in the academic world, in terms of publishing.
Great, thank you. And then another question in the Q&A, just wondering if journals based in the US differ from those in an international setting, i.e. Asian journals, in terms of validity?
Oh, no, I don't think that we could discriminate on that basis. I think that any peer-reviewed journal, wherever in the world it is located, is reputable. And again, it depends on you researching the journal, researching the editorial board, checking on the impact factor, and that'll give you an idea of the credibility. It does not matter where the journal is located. Every single country in the world have journals. Most academic institutions are affiliated with a journal. We have a journal here at NCU called the International Journal of Graduate Higher Education. That's an open access journal, peer-reviewed, but open access. And so, no, I think that seek journals, in other countries as much as you would within the US. There's no harm in doing so.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Bloomberg, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A or the chat. And what I would remind everybody is that this is recorded and we will post it in the Center for Teaching and Learning along with Dr. Bloomberg's PowerPoint presentation, which is another great resource for you as well too, as you're looking at publishing. As several people have said, thank you, Dr. Bloomberg. It's very informative and we appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks to you and the CTL and to everybody who attended. I appreciate all of your time. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.